McCarthy, who is one of the pioneers of discovery and also avoidance technology for Microburst. And you have his bio in your email, so I encourage you to read that. And then I'll pass the time over to Dr. McCarthy. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's a real pleasure to be here. And can you hear me okay? All right. If you can't, raise your hand or something like that. I'm going to give you a lot of information fairly quickly. I have 10 minutes, so I have to really go very fast with this.
Let's do more than that.
The objective of the presentation is to give you a history of the microburst situation. Does anyone not know what a microburst is by any chance? Raise your hand. I just would like to know. Everybody knows what a microburst is. How many people here are pilots? Okay, well that's a good sign. Okay, so I'm going to give you a history of how we came to understand that there was a nasty thing out there called a microburst, and then how we came to deal with it, and describe a cross-cutting process between scientists, which I was one, a pilot, I was M1, controllers, government program managers, academia, all came together to solve this very complicated problem. So people who are involved in this, some of these people you know very well. For some reason, the name that I would hope is very familiar to you is Ted Fujita, but he's been dead a number of years. If you hear F scale on a tornado, the F stands for Fujita scale. And he was a key player in discovering that microburst. And then at NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research, myself and my colleague Jim Wilson, a gentleman from MIT Lincoln Laboratory, at Boeing, Alan Mullally. There's a story about him. When I first worked with him, he was an engineer at Boeing Commercials. He went on to be the chief engineer for the Boeing 777. He went on to be the president of Boeing, and now he's president of the Ford Motor Company. So he did very well. I'm not selling stock, but anyway, we had a number of folks at United Airlines, some folks at the FAA, NASA, and all of the military alphabet soup people in running different organizations in aviation. So it was a real mix of people that helped us happen. Now, how did it all start? Now, microbursts have been around for, we think, hundreds of millions of years. The only thing we do know is we think that pterodactyls became extinct because they didn't have a good thrust to weight ratio, and so they just couldn't make it through a microburst. But they're still around, and back in 1975, an Eastern Airlines aircraft, let's see if I can go back, good. An Eastern Airlines aircraft was on an approach to runway 22 left at JFK Airport in New York. Had a normal approach, was coming in a little too fast. They didn't know it, but they had a little headwind right in here. And then what they were flying to is in the first documented microburst accident. And there was a downdraft, and then it spread out horizontally in all directions, but not completely symmetrically. So what they got was a headwind, a throttle, the pilot pulled back on the throttle. At the same time, he hit the downwind, the downdraft, and got into a tailwind component, and had what the FAA used to call a premature impact with terrain. It killed 122 people. There's a ghost story that there was a John McCarthy on that airplane. In those days, NTSB put all the names of the dead in the newspaper the next day as soon as they were. And so it kind of freaked me out. That's the guy in touch with the family, which was a very strange experience. It helped me get more involved in it, actually. Now, a downburst, we eventually called it a microburst because of some technical reasons. This is too big of an event. Again, it's a downdraft that spreads out horizontally in all directions, although not necessarily asymmetrically. the aircraft gets a headwind, a downdraft, and then a tailwind, all in about 25 seconds. So if you think about yourself flying along, this whole thing is happening in 25 seconds. The serious part is about 17 seconds. And you have really 5 or 7 seconds to recognize that you're in such an event. And then you have to do something about it or worse. So and this is kind of a typical cumulus cloud, non-thunderstorm yet cloud that can produce a downdraft like a microburst, and or a much serious thunderstorm can produce it. We have some examples of that. The strongest one we know had a it had a 218 knot differential over Andrews Air Force Base, and it happened about 5 minutes after President Reagan landed in the old 707 Air Force One, and it knocked the airplane around. But if he had been on approach, no, we don't think the airplane could have gotten through an event that strong. Just imagine the flight speeds that you have, and would not yet have these experiences. Okay. A little bit about it in higher detail. It's a cold air plunge. It's produced primarily by evaporative cooling. In the middle of the cold air plunge, downdraft or air from the outside of the plunge entrains or mixes with it and makes the air colder. Cold air goes down, and it always spreads out at the bottom because the microburst doesn't dig a hole in the ground. So in the middle of the microburst, there actually is very little or no wind, but the action is the headwind and the tailwind. So that's basically what it is. The other thing, I want to tell you 2 things that were crucial in our work. The first one is, in this kind of world, this is in the Denver area, we saw rings of dust or glowing dust, and we could see this picture of what the microburst looks like. So it was visually identifiable in most cases. You could look down from and also on the leading edge, there's a vortex curl, which also is identifiable if you are looking very carefully. So there were visual identification and some other identification I'll tell you a little bit later. I think this is a set of slides that are particularly crucial. Let's see, if this is not the one I'm trying to show you. It is. Let me go back to the first one. This is the first time a microburst has ever been seen on Doppler radar. In this particular area, in the green area or blue area, air is flowing towards the radar, and in the yellow area, air is flowing away from the radar. So if you think about that with a Doppler radar, it's a pure divergent flow. Nothing in the atmosphere can produce this except for microburst. If it's a rotational event like a tornado or a mesocyclone, this event will be rotated 90 degrees, and you see air moving one way and another way, but a cyclonic thing. So in 1978, a small experiment occurred near O'Hare, and here's when that same event first appeared near the ground. And there's a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, and here it is a minute later, and here it is about 5 minutes later, and here it is about 7 minutes later.
If I could interrupt real quickly, could you explain to the students who are not meteorologists here what the blues and yellows mean?
Okay. Blues are the radar detects motion. And if the motion is towards the radar, it's blue. If it's stronger than that, it folds over to an orange color. If it's away from the radar, it's more of it's a yellow, and it could be even stronger. And that's the same radar, by the way, that cops use for giving you a ticket. But this is 30 meters, 30 feet across radar, and the cop radar is about this big. Anyone ever gotten a speeding ticket? Silence.
If you're driving heavy rain, they might have to do.
That's right. If it's heavy rain, go see the judge. It didn't happen. Okay. So we knew when this happened that we could detect a microburst with near 100% accuracy. And that's huge information. But we had to convince the world that this was going on, and that took half of the rest of our life. Here's a three-dimensional picture done by a guy who went on to be the head of NCAR briefly. This is a triple Doppler picture of the downdraft concentrating here and spreading out with a kind of a vortex ring curve. And so that's the first triple Doppler radar, which allows us to put together the whole thing. So this is a Fujita image of the Dallas-Fort Worth microburst. We have a gentleman here who's going to tell us about that in a few minutes. He actually witnessed this accident. It was an incredibly severe accident at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And what was important about it, it showed just how severe it can be. For example, I mentioned the vortex ring. Come on, here. A vortex ring, and here there are 1, 2, 3 vortex rings, and perhaps a fourth coming back. Yes, sir.
What are the horizontal dimensions above, down, below?
Good question. A microburst is typically about 2 kilometers across at its most severe. That's about 5,000 feet. That's about the length of a runway. Okay, so it's small compared to many other things that you will see in meteorology. So it's small, and the other thing about it is it takes about 5 minutes. Once it hits the ground, it will become most severe, and by 10 minutes, it's gone. So it's small, doesn't last very long. Okay? It's also, since we know that there are probably 10% of thunderstorms have these, they're not severe unless you fly through at low altitude. So it means the probability of flying through one of these things before we went through a lot of training and so on was extremely low. Now it's even much, much lower. So we'll get into that kind of information. Some accidents. This is Eastern 66 in Kennedy Airport with my soulmate on board. Here's a Continental at Denver, 1975. It crashed with approximately 80 knot tailwind. Nobody hurt. Allegheny crashed in Philadelphia. No one hurt. Eastern crashed with about 120 something killed. I'm sorry, Atlanta. They went into a deep dive or a deep descent and then recovered. Pan Am New Orleans had killed the most people. It killed 153 people and 6 people on the ground. Dallas-Fort Worth killed about 130 something. And U.S. Air was the last known wind shear accident by an air carrier in the United States. At Cleveland. And so you can see that there's some good news in this briefing. Right after the Pan Am accident, the National Academy of Sciences put together a low altitude wind shear and its hazard panel. I was on that panel to come up with some suggestions, and the recommendations I'll tell you is the need for an integrated wind shear program, wind shear education program, include pilot control communications, and develop a complete wind shear detection system, surface and airborne. All of these things took place. So I'm very happy about that. We also conducted the JAWS project, which stands for the Joint Airport and Weather Studies Project, at Denver, where we, in the summer of 1982, we detected 93 microbursts in the Denver area in those 90 days. And we had some exciting times. On one non-weather day, there's a second. One non-weather day, the Pan Am crash at New Orleans took place. And I'll never forget that day. We told the FAA, who did not fund this project, that there will come a time when they'll be sorry because this problem had not been solved. And I remember pulling off the road saying, oh my God, approximately 10% of thunderstorms have microbursts. We think so. Yet there, you had 90 days. Presumably, you didn't have a thunderstorm every day, so that meant that on some days you had either multiple thunderstorms or multiple microbursts from the same thunderstorm on a given day.
All of the above.
All
Yes.
of the above. Okay.
We had many multiple microbursts. Days when there was no weather, and days when there was some weather and no detectable microburst, but they were very few days like that. So when there was weather at Denver, we pretty much expected to see microbursts. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, here was our network. This is Denver. This is the old airport. We had surface weather stations around. We had 3 Doppler radars at each point of the triangle, and we had about 3 research aircraft working the storms. So that's the experiment that we did. We didn't have anybody know what kind of airplane that was?
DC-8.
DC-8. Do you know any DC-8s that can fly with a ground sensor attached like that?
Yes.
Okay.
But lately,
Not lately. Now, the low-level wind shear alert system was recently put out in the late 1970s, and it had 6 stations on it, and it couldn't detect microbursts because a microburst is much smaller than the low-level wind shear alert system. And so, research done at NCAR, which is where I did this work, came up with a new network for Denver, which had 35 stations on it. And the ability to detect microbursts with the ground-based system was much improved, but in the end, we combined the system with Doppler radar, and so the probability of detection went to essentially 100%. We had a radar ground-based system. On another project that we had, hey, before I do that, why don't you tell us about what you do with Pan Am? Bill 191.
Been flying airplanes all my life. I've been in lots of weather. And I was going into DFW, so this is north, and the crash occurred right there. There's 2 there, now they got 7 runways there. There's 4 runways at this time. And I landed on a Braniff airline this way, and as I'm coming down the final, I'm sitting in the left window. I'm trying to lead up to how violent the weather was here. So we're about 1,000 feet above the ground, and I'm sitting back. We're coming down flying like this. We had a 20 or 30 knot crab angle. And I'm asking myself, how the heck is he going to land this airplane? We're going down, and slowly we got close to the ground. He started swinging the nose back around. And when we touched down, there was a windsock right here beside the end of the runway. It was hanging limp. So I figured we had 40 or 50 knots of crosswind at 1,000 feet and no wind on the ground. So I'm trying to show you how violent the weather was that day. I got off the airplane, you know, the DFW, the terminals are in here, got on a shuttle, and there's a cargo rental place right here. And I was in this cargo rental place, and they had windows on 3 sides, and it's about the size of this room, windows. I'm standing here in line to get my rental car, and it starts raining out that window there. But it's not raining on this side. And the rain is coming down 45 degrees, and I'm like, wow, I've never seen it that way like that before. And in a few minutes, now it's raining over here, and not raining there, and it's going 45 degrees the other way. So this microburst went right over. And that was, it was so interesting. I got out of line and went outside, and I saw this rain shower going in this direction, probably about 20 or 30 knots. And the ground here was higher than the ground here, so I can't see the ground over here. I started to go back in, and somebody said, "Hey, look over there," and we could see the smoke from the crash. But it was quite a phenomenon to see. Rain there, none there. A minute later, rain here, the other direction, and then watch this thing go across the ground. So that was one of the experiences I asked you. What's the width of a microburst?
It must be an awesome experience to see such a hot blast. Thank you. About 3 years after Jaws, the FAA, who, by the way, a week after the Pan Am experiment, the Dallas experiment gave us the New Orleans experiment, gave us more money than we ever could count. So they came into our program huge dollars, and then made the whole program go. I don't know, go through all the details of that. We were invited into Stapleton Tower in 1995, I believe it was, 1985, and we produced the clause project was classify, locate, and avoid wind shear. And this particular event, we reported just with the enhanced L loss, a 100-knot loss on the runway for a 17 approach. And a Continental aircraft came in, got the warning from the controller, did an immediate go around, knew enough to pitch up, and got out of it. And Aviation Week and Space Technology gave the whole string of people involved in making that award from the pilot on down their Laurel Award for that year, one of the Laurel Awards. Okay, another thing that's an important piece of the puzzle is that these three-dimensional pictures of Microburst became the core of horizontal and vertical wind information for a Microburst in the three-dimensional motion simulator. So you can't go into a three-dimensional motion simulator today without getting a Microburst as part of the training. And so it's, I don't know if you have it in yours here or not. Do you have wind shear in your machines? I couldn't get the answer to that yesterday. Not far after this came terminal Doppler weather radar. It looks like an X-rad. It is an X-rad, except it's much closer to the airport, and it scans the surface every 1 minute. And it produced some tremendous capability. It produced a picture of the weather, the location of the microburst, and then information that they would read to the controllers. Runway 26 approach, microburst alert, 35-knot loss on 3-mile final. And we did produce one, a 95-knot loss on let's say a 1-mile final, I don't remember now. And the control said, say attention. And the pilot said, well, I'm glad you asked my attention because I don't intend to land and I'm going to go around. And it was a big break, but that's a long story also. Okay, there is an effort, use of NextRad to expand the understanding of weather conditions. It's now part of the integrated terminal weather system. So we have 47 PWRs out there and about 30-something wind shear processors on the ASR 11. So there are about 75 airports in the United States that have a wind shear measurement capability designed to detect microbursts. I said that.
These are all surface-based, are they?
No, the radars are radars. Right. Okay, this is all the locations where there is some kind of a TBWR or ASR 9 in the United States. It's heavily weighted towards the southeastern 2/3 of the country where they think microbursts are most likely to occur. It doesn't help you in certain places. I don't see one in, I don't even see one in, let's see here. That's Phoenix.
No, it's Tucson.
Where is that?
That's Tucson.
Tucson. That must be Phoenix. That's probably an ASR 11, and I don't see one in Cresco. So the next thing that came along was a wind shear training area, led by Boeing, Lockheed Douglas, United Airlines, and my little company. It's a cycle story there. NCAR was afraid of me doing that as part of NCAR because of liability reasons. So they said, would you do it as a consultant? And I said, yes, I would. And then not too long after we got into it, the FAA held everyone involved in the program harmless. So anyway, it was a very important program. The lessons learned from all the work was avoid microburst wind shear. Recognition is difficult. The time available for recognition is 5 to 15 seconds. Count off 5 to 15 seconds and you're in long. Effective crew coordination is essential. If it's a two or more man crew, you'll see what the other crew person has to do to keep this thing going. And flight path must be controlled with pitch, attitude, and unusual stick forces can result with these rapid changes in winds. Reduced airspeed, and I'll talk about that as a critical part of it. So what do you look for? If you have takeoff, in takeoff and approach, if you have 15 knots indicated airspeed variations, or 500 feet per minute vertical speed changes, or 5 degrees of pitch attitude changes, or the changes shown in the approach, 1 knot glide slope displacement, unusual throttle positions for a significant period of time, and that is, for example, if you're getting a headwind and you don't know it, and your throttle is up, that means you ought to know that you're going to wind shear, a microburst wind shear. So you've got to really stay on top of this in a system. So I don't want to go into this in any great detail, but we came up with a model of flight crew actions. Any signs of wind shear, follow standard operating procedures, and know the wind shear recovery techniques. In red, report the encounter. In the case that you were talking about, there was no report of the encounter at the time. In the New Orleans accident, there was no report of the encounter just prior to the accident. So if you're in a wind shear and you suspect it's any kind of wind shear or a microburst, tell the tower. Or if there's no tower, talk to the frequencies that you're using. It could be the only clue that comes along. How am I doing?
Got another 20 minutes.
20 minutes, sounds like that. I'll go back through it. Okay, wind shear training is now required by FAAs on 121, all 121 after 1991. It became part of ICAO recommended requirements worldwide. It's essentially required of all airline pilots throughout the world, as far as I know. It's been adapted for high-end GA work by FAA contract to the Flight Safety Foundation. It's a great safety organization, which I've had a lot of involvement with. There's been relatively little connectivity to small GA because the risk is much smaller.
I disagree with that.
What?
I disagree. The risk is just as great.
Tell me about it.
You're coming along at, say, 60 knots, and then you get airspeed, and you enter this thing, and all of a sudden airspeed jumps up 80 knots. And you don't know what's happening. You pull the throttle back and slow it down, and then you come out the other side, and you lose 20 or 40 knots. It can destroy a lighter airplane just as easily as that.
But you have a greater, in a power, in a small airplane, you have greater access to power than you do in a jet.
I disagree with this. Like, if I get a downburst where the air's coming down at 2,000 feet a minute, I can't climb 2,000 feet a minute where the airlines can.
Well, that's a whole other ball. I don't think it's been properly addressed, and I probably shouldn't have the statement up here.
Is it a correct statement that general aviation aircraft are less likely to be in that situation?
Well, how many accidents still have they had with general aviation and microburst related?
We had one here. 1991, we had one here with 182.
What happened?
It's dry microburst. They didn't recognize what was happening with the full go-around procedure. Flew into a Jenner tree.
Flew up into what?
Flew into a Jenner tree.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
See, it wasn't a problem.
They tend to consider the risk smaller because if a GA plane crashes and fewer people die than if an airliner crashes, then not necessarily the risk isn't there. It's just as dangerous. They just don't think it's
The
worth
number of
it.
passengers is smaller.
Yeah, they just don't think it's worth putting the money into it to put it every single
That could be. I don't believe the money has been put into this. I think AOTA raised this issue, but nothing really happened from it. And it certainly wouldn't happen today with the way money is going.
I mean, we have the NTSB, the big study they did about 10 years ago, microbursts were, I don't remember the numbers, but they were the cause of GA accidents.
They just didn't do anything about it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
If you start to see the telltale signs of entering a microburst, which is airspeed picks up and then drops off really abruptly, if you start to see that initial spike in airspeed, do you want to, I understand you want to add power and pull back on the stick and bring the nose up.
Right.
Do you want to try to fly a banking turning maneuver as well, or is that risky if you start to enter the downdraft?
Right. I think the argument has been maintain configuration, fly straight, and add power, and
Don't try to turn away from the downdraft.
unless you know you're far enough away to make a clear turn away. The other thing is, if you want to trade as much airspeed for altitude as you can, but don't stall the airplane.
Right.
So if you play the stick shaper, and the number of aircraft you have. So another question over here, and I need to move on. Okay, and I can't spend much time about it because I know less about it, but it's now pretty much required that all new airplanes, commercial airplanes, have an onboard system, Doppler radar system to detect microbursts. And I'll show you what some of them look like. It shows a red corridor ahead of you if the Doppler radar detects a delta V in excess of a certain number. And it's not shear, it's really a shear number. It's a magnitude of wind change over 2 kilometers. And that's what it displays. It is shear, and it looks like this on 2 different carriers. One is Airbus and one is Boeing. I'm sure there are more advanced displays today, but I just haven't been in that environment. Okay, so let me show you how I think we did. We had a goal of decreasing the frequency of domestic wind shear accidents from about 1 to 2 a year to once every 20 years. It's now 1994 since the last accident. So that's 20 years. And we feel pretty good. I don't know what you put around here. I'm afraid the phone's been ringing. But it hasn't in 20 years. And so we think we did a pretty good job with it. The jury will always be out, but we arrived at a much better accident rate. Again, we've not had a 121 air carrier accident since 1994. So here are the fatalities from 1965 through 1974, all the way through to 1994, and it went up and it went down. So huge success in terms of what we're looking for. Conclusions. The National Academy of Science recommendations fully addressed. And that's because the FAA administrator in 1995 said we will follow every single recommendation, and the FAA did. This is a Boeing slide. It may be biased, hard to believe. They view that over time, the most important system was the wind shear training gauge in terms of the amount of space shown on this diagram. Airborne reactive displays and terminal Doppler radar take an increasingly small amount of space. TWR is great when you're there, when you have one where you are. But these guys are flying worldwide and countrywide, small towns and big towns where they don't have TWR. So I think, I tend to agree with the guy who put this together, who's Alan Mullally. I tend to agree that this was a pretty darn important part of the system. And I think the only other thing I want to talk about is this figure. And that is, how do you go about it? The question was raised, how did we do so well? And we defined the problem and interventions. We prioritized and developed plans, and we implemented the plans by bringing very diverse people together. We had scientists, we had, like I said at the beginning, we had controllers, we had airline people, we had engineers, we had a whole bunch of people working together. We would have closed door meetings where they would hang their guns outside the door. I shouldn't say that in Arizona, but I mean, they would come in representing their expertise, and we would solve the problem. And it worked. It was very successful. Another factor was a lot of people being killed, and the government put their differences aside and provided the money necessary to develop these systems, which is limiting to knowledge. So that's all I have to say to introduce my wife. And please stay listening. So that's my way to ask for a few more questions. Yes.
Yeah, what success do you have at detecting the delta V's prior to touchdown? I guess the delta V only shows up as it's the ground. You know, you get visually, you can see a microburst in progress up to 10 minutes before the thing hits the ground by the sharp descending sharp precipitation.
Only in the dry microwave.
Only in the dry months, yeah, because the pace is too low.
It doesn't work so well in Florida.
Well, I'm thinking Arizona.
And you don't see the dust ring is flying out.
Right.
So,
Is,
the answer is,
how far off the ground can the radar
in
see?
the terminal weather information system, which combines all these sensors, it does have an algorithm that looks for convergence aloft and follows that down in the subsequent scans, that when it turns from a convergence aloft to a divergence near the surface, and it puts out an advanced microburst warning. Its probability of detection is in the 70s or so. It's not huge, but it's not 100 like we have at once at some time.
Right, and how soon before touchdown do you first warning?
It's up to as early as 5 minutes.
Wow.
Because we don't have a strong evidence that crews are making a decision on the basis of that system. But we're still working on it. Yes, sir.
In the middle of the microburst, what is the range of possible vertical velocities, vertical components of the airflow?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. First of all, vertical velocity, IPSI is a function of.
I'm not talking about the airplane, I'm talking about the air itself.
Well, the air itself can be coming down as high as 100 knots in a very extremely powerful severe storm microburst. It's more likely 20 to 50 knots. And
That's vertical
but
component.
it doesn't. You have to realize that vertical speed doesn't continue to the ground.
Yeah.
Because we look at microburst impact, and we don't find little holes where it does vertical velocity stuff. It turns into horizontal speed. Any questions? Any other questions?
And first of all, I have a comment to the students, and that is, if you look at this slide, this really summarizes what Ignite is all about, which is teaching our students and learning how to define or articulate a problem in your field, come up with a plan or solution, and then implementing that plan. So I think this is a great talk for all of our fields and students represented here today. I also wanted to ask you a question about the instrumentation. Is it mostly radar based? In the case of a dry microburst, where the precipitation would, for example, completely evaporate, then you don't have any more targets that the radar can measure the velocities with. So is there a potential that a dry microburst would go unnoticed by the system?
It is possible, but it does a very good job for two reasons. Bugs. So in a high-based environment, there are a lot of bugs out there that show targets. So we have found that in dry environments, we still get a pretty good signal, not as good as rain-filled environment. And also, refractive index gradients also show up and get mixed into the flow and allows us to see things better. So far, it hasn't been a big problem. But it's a really important question. And going back to your first thing, I cannot emphasize more the importance of the construct. It's a, meteorologists, there's nothing against meteorologists here, but I am one. But scientists tend to work in their own cubbyhole, and we would have never solved this problem. You have to reach out to the people who fly airplanes, the people who control airplanes, instrumentation. Everything that goes along with this has to be mixed together without without goring any ounces, so to speak. And it was a very successful program.
Excellent. Any more questions?
Yep, one back.
Regarding the Delta L1011 crash at Dallas Fort Worth that the one gentleman commented on, was there any negligence or incompetence on the part of either the pilot or the co-pilot or both? Was that avoidable, or was it can the blame not really be placed on the pilots?
I can only tell you what the NT. I don't like to get inside of NTSB any further than I have to. Their report said that the accident occurred. The primary cause of the accident was the pilot flying into a visible known thunderstorm on final to DFW and encountering a microburst for which he had inadequate training to understand, because his training program wasn't in place then. And then there were some other factors. Could the weather service give them more information? Maybe.
And did they ever add power and pull the nose up to a certain degree like they're supposed to, or was there no attempt made?
Yes, they did.
I guess that there was.
Yes.
And I've flown that one year, and I crashed a few times, and similar. I crashed a few times before I and we all flew 747s, and we did all kinds of things to figure out how these advanced wind shears worked and simulated, and they work, and people fly. But there are microbursts out there, like the one at Andrews. If you get into it, we don't think anybody's going to have it. You know, it's beyond the power of any airplane to fly that kind of thing. And they're around.
What was do they have any idea what the vertical speed of the Dallas Fort Worth microburst was? I mean, that's an L1011, that's a big wide body airliner. I mean, what vertical speed starts to become hazardous to an aircraft that size?
Well, again, I think it's like I'm trying to say, vertical speed is important. Vertical speed is what produces the horizontal speed. And the horizontal speed were very large indeed. And the turbulence was very large, which doesn't make anything better. And those big vortices, those vortex rings made it much harder for the crew to figure out what was going on. Yes.
I can extrapolate on that a little bit. It's a 70-knot total wind shift. 30-knot headwind when we hit the core. The core pushed the airplane down, and they had a 40-knot tailwind within a few seconds after that. That was the final straw, and he ran out of air. Right. Actually touched down on the perimeter road, and then bounced into the airport environment.
Yeah, they were doing about 105, 110
Yeah,
knots.
he had a car on the road, and he actually what really caused most of the catastrophe was he also slammed into a 1 million-gallon water tank. That at about 100 knots, and that destroyed most of the aircraft.
And they took out a guy on the road.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the slide that shows the trend in the depth of time? Because I want to make a point, and that is before the 1970s, it's not that the microburst was producing fatalities, it wasn't documented because the microburst had not been discovered.
And actually, there are fatalities of a aircraft type. It crashed in Lake Pontchartrain. We think it's something that was microburst related, but it was never attributed to that. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I tell you, I can talk about this all day, but I know you guys have something else to do. Okay.
Well, with that, thank you very much. If you have any further questions for Dr. McCarthy, you may address those to him after the seminar. Thank you all for coming. It looks like we might still have some refreshments left over, so please grab some on the way out. It was certainly like to sincerely thank Dr. and Mrs. McCarthy for coming today. We hope you enjoy your visit.